Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the No Name Music Cast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And ladies and gentlemen, and all other people listening to our podcast, we're recording on a Sunday night.
Woo!
Wednesday night recordings seem to have been thrown completely out the windows. We're mavericks. We could record at any time you like, but tonight is Sunday night.
We've been doing 2 a week now. So we have to add in some extra days here and there.
Absolutely. You will always have your No Name Music Cast fix every week, published on a Wednesday at 7 p.m. US Eastern Time. However, sometimes we double up weeks, sometimes we take weeks off, sometimes we took a month off. I mean, it all works out. But as a listener, you will always have your No Name Music Cast fix every week.
And everyone I seem to know is getting married this spring, which coming up to the first week of May is a no for Joy. So I'm going traveling for a wedding and it's Charlie's birthday. So just keep that in perspective.
There we go. Well, fantastic. Well, anyhow, here at the very top of the show, I have a couple of music news items for you and everyone. Now, the first piece of music news is something that I thought was very interesting. And this is about James Hetfield from Metallica.
Okay.
Now, James Hetfield obviously is the singer and rhythm guitarist and sometimes lead guitarist and songwriter in Metallica. And as you probably know, if you've seen him as of late, he very much enjoys his tattoos and tattoo art. He's got full sleeves. He's got it up his neck, goes with the music, goes with the kind of style that he is portraying in the band. He probably just enjoys that too, and that's all fine. But this week, he got a new and very special tattoo, which did pique my interest a little bit.
Oh, what's that?
So, as everybody knows, we lost Lemmy in 2015, December 2015. And when he died, he was cremated. And then his ashes were distributed to close friends. And his ashes were distributed to close friends in bullet casings.
Of course.
I mean,
it's
why?
Very Metallica.
Well, very, very, very Motorhead.
Yes, that's true. Oh, you're talking about Lemmy killed.
Yeah, Lemmy from Metallica.
Yes, okay.
Yes. He died in December 2015. He was cremated, and his ashes were distributed to his very close friends in bullet casings. And as you said, that is a very metal thing to do.
Yes.
Okay, so James Hetfield wasn't given one of these bullet casings. However, I believe a very close friend of his was. So he decided this week or last week to get a tattoo done on his middle finger of the Ace of Spades. Obviously, Motorhead are very famous for Ace of Spades. And
that was my attempt of a virgin. Anyway.
And in this tattoo, the friend of his who had the Lemmy remains bullet casing, they took a little bit of the cremation matter out of the bullet casing, mixed it in with the black ink at the tattoo parlor. And so he has had Lemmy's remains tattooed in an Ace of Spades tattoo on his middle finger. So not only is he now walking around with Lemmy inside him, he can flip people off at any time and use Lemmy to do that.
Is that safe?
Well,
what's the rules on that?
I have no idea. I've never heard of anything like this before. But in the realms of being metal, is there anything more metal to do?
Yeah, that might be a little bit farther than I'm willing to go. I'm just are you supposed to have people's remains injected into your body? I don't know if that's general surgeon or whatever the UK equivalent approved.
I don't know. I don't know how much of this cremation matter was mixed in with the ink. I don't know. I mean, it's been burnt. I mean, it's biological matter that's been burnt.
Could it be any worse than what's in American cheese? And I've ate 50 of those.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'm sure it's fine. But I mean, I've never heard of that. Someone's lost a loved one and then they've had some of their cremation matter tattooed into them. But as I said, in the realm of the most metal thing you can do is
that's really
the Ace of Spades on your middle finger containing the real Lemmy, and then you can flip people off with Lemmy in your finger. I mean, I don't think it actually gets any better than that.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, Kiss had a thing where they had these Kiss comics back in, I think, the 70s or 80s, where they mixed their blood in with the ink.
Yeah, I remember that. But that's a common one, though, Blood Brothers and things like that. That's kind of a cultural thing, I think.
Yeah, but yeah, this was a very unique thing that I read about, and I thought, yeah, and everyone's like, yeah, in the realms of being metal, there's no more metal than this. This is where it ends.
It's so weird, honestly. All right, what's your next piece of news, Tim?
Okay, my other piece of news is sad news. This week we lost Dickie Betts from the Allman
Well, that
Brothers.
was my piece of news, so now we're both going to talk about
Okay, well,
it.
Joy, you speak about Dickie Betts.
So Dickie Betts from the Allman Brother was 80. He passed away this from the Allman Brother. Yeah, there's only one, the Allman Brothers. He was actually the guitarist, and he said at 80. He kind of was known, and Tim, you might want to speak on this, as having like a countrified guitar style, like very country sounding.
Hmm.
I'm not exactly sure what the actual guitar words for that are.
Well, yeah, I mean, he had very much country influences. I used to have a vinyl record which was produced under his full name, which was Richard Betts,
Hmm.
which was very country, and it had steel guitars and banjos and that kind of stuff on there. But I think that was the thing about the Allman Brothers. They brought together kind of like the jam band,
Yeah,
Grateful Dead,
Southern
with
rock.
Southern rock and the country influences, and that's what created that Allman Brothers sound.
Yeah, but when I was reading about him, they kept saying he had a very distinct sound of his own, but I think the band as a whole did. And of course, they were kind of known as being Hellraisers, and he was at the top of that list, I think. From what I understand, he left at 16 and joined the circus, Tim. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, but that doesn't surprise me.
And then he became a renowned guitarist playing with Allman Brothers. He wrote the biggest hit, Rambling Man, which is probably the one you guys have heard if you don't know a whole lot about the Allman Brothers. And as me and Tim have talked about, there are like dead, like culture obsessed, like they absolutely adore the Allman Brothers. Like you don't hear that much about them, but there's like a huge subset of people that is their thing.
Yeah,
It's
I
very
mean,
interesting.
yeah, I mean, I had a friend who was super, super into the Allman Brothers and had all the bootlegs and was a part of that tape trading community when that was a thing. And
Mhm.
the Allman Brothers fans tend to be super hardcore with their fandom, and you can listen to 52 different versions of Les Breers in A minor and go, oh, this is the one with the 15-minute drum solo, not the 14-minute drum solo, and this is the one where he references this riff and.
And if you're like me, you're like, great, so I have to hear it for another minute. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Allman Brothers. I think there's some great music in the Allman
Yeah, I do
Brothers.
agree with you.
But my preference is listening to studio recordings over live recordings because the
Agreed.
studio recordings have a beginning, middle, and end. Now, I can tell you as someone who's played in a number of jam bands, it's really fun to play in a jam band and
Of course.
and have a song work on a theme, and the song goes for 17
Good
minutes.
transition into
Oh,
the
it's
next song. I know.
fantastic. But do I want to watch someone else do that? Probably not.
Especially not in a live environment. It's one thing if I'm like out sitting out with a chair with a drink and watching a band and like they're doing all that, right, Tim? Like on a spring night. It's another to watch it on YouTube. I can't watch like that's kind of the different thing. But for
Yeah.
those, yeah. I mean, for those who were wondering, he did pass away at home. He says he was in his Florida home, surrounded by family. He had been battling cancer and he passed away with loved ones around. And they said that they were kind of well aware that this was probably going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, he was 80 years old, and I mean, he
Hmm.
lived a hard, hard life. I mean, he lived that sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle. And I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure that every substance passed through his body at some time, living that kind of hard lifestyle. So I mean, the fact that he got to 80, and sadly, it cancer what took him. But I mean,
Yeah.
rock in peace, Mr. Dickie Betts.
Well, I mean, like I said, he left at home at 16 to join the circus. So he had an interesting life. And we're glad that you were able to make the music that you could while you were around, and best wishes.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, this week it is Joy's turn to pick the topic, and as ever, I don't know what Joy's going to pick. So over to you, Joy.
Well, I'm hoping after we pick the same music news, Tim doesn't have this pick for next week. I'm kidding, guys. So with that being said, we're not going to talk about like specific songs. I found a list and I started going down a rabbit hole. I spent a long time on this, Tim, probably more than what was warranted, about some crazy stories and different things that people have said about musicians. I want to start this by caveating that some of these people are very much not alive, so we cannot confirm or deny how accurate these stories are and how, they're just, some people call them crazy stories, funny stories, just different things you didn't know about these people. And so to change it up, I was going to do that. So we will start with one of these people that is very much so, in my opinion, not alive, but for whatever reason, some people seem to think he may still be, and that is Elvis.
Yeah, the whole thing about Elvis that he's living on the moon and he's still alive and all this National Enquirer style headlines.
But so, did you know, and this is just kind of some random things about him, he gave his mom a Cadillac. She did not drive. He gave his backup singer a Cadillac, his dentist, and his hairstyle. And he once saw a bank teller admiring his Cadillac, so he wrote her a check so she could buy one for herself.
Yeah, I mean, Elvis in his day was incredibly wealthy, in that time. And I mean, now you have like your Paul McCartneys who are worth probably $1 billion, or your Taylor Swifts that probably have that same kind of wealth. But, certainly back in the 60s, 70s, I mean, Elvis was, as rich as it came. And he was very generous with his money. I know I've been to Graceland a couple of times, and there's a whole wall in the back of Graceland of cashed checks. And apparently, if you wrote to Elvis and said, I'm from the church mission of something, or I'm working with disabled children, I think it was $500 or $300 was the standard amount. And all you had to do was write to him and say, Elvis, I've got this thing and we need this thing. And the colonel would look at it and go, yeah, that looks legit. And send a check for 300 or 500 or whatever it was.
So that in and of itself was 5 Cadillacs that they know he gave away or gave a check for someone to buy a Cadillac. Yeah. And I always think to myself when I hear facts like this, why do things like this not happen to me? Why am I not looking at someone's car, idolizing it, and then I get handed a check? Things like this do not happen in my life.
Well, I mean, you have people like Dave Grohl who'll go and eat in a Denny's on tour and then leave a $5,000 tip.
So speaking of that, this is not one of my facts, but it is something that is kind of spicy on the internet right now. So Jennifer Lopez recently did a documentary, which I know Tim probably has zero clue about, nor would know that that's a thing, but I didn't watch it. I'm not interested in watching it. I like some of J-Lo's music, but like that doesn't interest me. But apparently she did not make herself look great in this documentary. There was a lot of pretentious things and things that just didn't sit well with people. And she always makes this comment about how she's still Jenny from the block, talking about how she's from the Bronx. So there's some debate about like the things she says about the Bronx. I'm not from New York. That's something I'm not going to touch. But there is some people on the internet who have been commenting that Jennifer Lopez is a terrible tipper, and that multiple times, because she's back with Brad Pitt, but they're married again, that he will go back behind her and leave an additional tip because she's so bad at tipping and it embarrasses him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know J-Lo, obviously.
Really, Tim?
But I can tell you, I know a couple, and I'm not going to name them, but I do know a couple. And this couple are very wealthy, very well off, very wealthy.
Okay.
And the husband is a breadwinner in that couple, and he has been earning lots of money for many years. And she's worked, the wife has worked, but they are not short of cash. He is incredibly generous with that. And, he'd be the first one to buy you food. He'd be the first one to buy you a round of drinks. And, he would also be the first one to leave, a generous tip in a restaurant.
Got it.
She, on the other hand, would leave the bare minimum or none at all because you say, oh, we can't afford that.
My rule is if you can't afford to tip at least 20%, Tim, that's the bare minimum, you can't afford to eat out.
No, I agree. I mean, you can discuss U.S. tipping culture and the rights and wrongs of it.
Yes, I'm not saying I agree with it, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but in the U.S., culturally, everyone wants a tip. If you're receiving some kind of service, you need to leave a tip, especially in a restaurant. And that's just how it is. And you said you can discuss the rights and wrongs of it. But that is like the social contract, if you will, when you engage in a restaurant or some other situation like that.
Pizza delivered, spark order to your door, whatever, right, Ted?
Exactly.
That's just part of it.
That's exactly how it works. And and you should build that into how much you're budgeting for it, because that is the contract of how it works. But yeah, especially if you're incredibly wealthy like that, I don't know, it's just poor. I mean, like I ate in a McAdoo's on Saturday. The bill was, I forget what it was, $38 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, I think the tip I left was maybe 30 or plus more percent. Yeah, because I think we might have even rounded up to 50, I think.
Yeah.
But it's just,
It's just part of the deal.
Part of the deal.
If you're going out to eat, you just assume you're going to have to make a tip. But my thing is so here is where I find this very interesting about this whole thing with J Lo and whatever his name is, Pitt. But what is his name? But Brad Pitt. So if I were dating someone and they were that bad of a tipper, I would have a conversation with them, explain to them this embarrasses me. We need to do this differently, right, Tim? And if they didn't, for me, the way you treat like waiters and wait staff and janitors and stuff, that's a big red flag. Big red flag. I probably wouldn't be in a relationship with that person anymore.
No,
that's bad of me to say, but it's a no for me.
Absolutely. But, I mean, I know nothing about J-Lo. To be honest,
I don't really either.
I didn't even know J-Lo was married to Brad Pitt until about 2 minutes ago, if I'm being honest with you.
They recently got back together.
Yeah, but I didn't even know that was a thing. But that's beside the point. But I wonder, has J-Lo ever had to work a minimum wage job or work in a shop or work in a restaurant?
That's the irony. She has this whole thing about being Jenny from the block and being a regular person and working real jobs and doing all these things. But there's some debate into whether that's true or not, Tim.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I don't know, but that sounds like
I don't know for sure, but
that sounds like a marketing tactic to me.
Okay, well, if there's some hardcore JLo fans out there, we're not trying to insult you. This is just what I read on the internet. All right, back to the topic at hand before me and Tim get in trouble. So this was interesting, and I don't know don't know all the details as to why he did this, but it was basically he made this album as a screw you to his record companies. So basically, Frank Sinatra was on Capitol Records, and they put out a record called "Come Swing with Me." There was some type of fight going on between Sinatra and Capitol Records. So then he formed his own record label separately and put out the exact same album under the name "Swing Along with Me." Okay. Have you heard that before, Tim?
No, I haven't heard that.
I mean, I like how it's "Come Swing with Me" and then "Swing Along with Me." That's pretty great. I mean, I would love to know like the details behind that, but I couldn't really find anything. They just said that they weren't getting along and he didn't agree and he wanted out of his contract and they wouldn't let him out.
Isn't this very similar, though, to the whole Taylor Swift situation where she re-recorded all of her records and it's now Taylor's version? And also in the same way that Def Leppard, they didn't own their streaming rights. So they went ahead and re-recorded all the songs from Hysteria, which were singles, effectively identically, and then released those to streaming because there was some record company dispute. It's almost the same thing.
Well, I mean, yeah. But I do find it very interesting. He did it. He released them at the exact. So when they released the album, Tim, he basically dropped his at the same time.
There we are. You don't mess with the chairman of the board.
Or whatever it was. Who was it that you said loves him? The guy that everybody in Britain loves.
Tom Jones.
Why couldn't I think of his name? I could see his face and I kept thinking, "What's up, Pussycat?" But I couldn't think of his name.
As he's known, Mr. What's Up, Pussycat.
All right. So this is a weird one, Tim. We're going to take a weird kind of dive here. But Neil Young directed and starred in a movie. Did you know about this?
Was it the jazz singer?
No, it's called Human Highway. At least he says it's a movie. None of the actors appear to understand what any of the lines are they're reciting, and it ends with the nuclear apocalypse and dancing. So if you guys have never Googled this movie, Human Highway, it's a 1982 American comedy film starred and co-directed by Neil Young. It had its, I guess, debut under his pseudonym, which was Bernard Shaky. Okay. And that it's co-directed with Dean Stockwell. And it's just, I have never seen anything like this, but it's just weird, Tim. Basically, employees and customers spend time at a small gas station diner in a fan fiction town next to a nuclear power plant, unaware it's their last day on Earth. And I guess he's trying to do, because, Neil Young's big on the political, right? I guess he was trying to indicate things like about nuclear power plants and things of that nature. His employee, so basically it's their last day on Earth. One of the employees, Lionel Switch, is the garage's goofy and bumbling auto mechanic. He just happens to come into this diner, who dreams of being a rock star. He says he can do it. And then basically There's tongue-in-cheek choreography and a nuclear war.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
that's the whole movie.
Neil Young, he's kind of a folk rock activist
Hmm.
type, but he really has pushed the envelope at sometimes. There's an album that he released which is just like electronic music, and I mean, it doesn't surprise me that he would come out something which is so completely oddball because that sort of fits the narrative of the things that he's done through his career.
But this is the kicker. At the nuclear power plant, there's these people called garbage men, and they're members of Devo, and they're wearing the hats. Reveal that the nuclear waste was routinely mishandled, and that was the cause. But it's members of Devo, Tim.
Well,
And they just show up wearing their hats.
they're probably got the nuclear waste and they whip it real good.
Like, anyway, and just so you guys know, Neil Young is the Lionel Switch character who's the mechanic in this restaurant that's going to make it one day as a musician, for full transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just streaming on Peacock on Netflix at the moment.
No, I had to deep dive into the chest of the internet to find out about this one.
You had to go on the dark web to find out about it.
I watched it, Tim. I watched just a little bit on YouTube, so I could find a cut on YouTube. And they are correct when they say the actors appear that they don't know what they're saying. Like, it's real weird, and like the lines don't come off right. And Neil Young is not an actor. Sorry, friend. Great singer, not an actor.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's a performer, he's an entertainer, he's an entity of all of himself.
Fair enough. All right. So next we're going to dive into an artist me and Tim just spent a long time talking about, David Bowie.
Yeah.
So he has distinctive eyes with one pupil permanently enlarged. And if you've ever seen pictures of him, it's very obvious, which came from a childhood fight. He tricked a friend into abandoning their date, letting Bowie sweep in, steal his date, and then that friend later punched him so hard he ended up in the emergency room, and that's why his eyes are the way they are.
Yeah, and one is a different color to the other as well.
Yeah, but did you know that came from it's obvious that he's got the blue and the brown or whatever going on, but did you know that he got punched and that's why his pupil is permanently dilated?
Yeah, in fact, I did actually know that. Something very distinctive about him was because of us, as they would say in the UK, a scrap.
I mean, you don't run in and steal your friend's date, Tim.
No, that's true. But, Mr. David Jones, he was probably a hot-headed man back then or something.
Well, if it's anything like half the people we've learned about, they don't always have the personality you think they're going to.
Well, back then he was just a young David Jones, probably a musician. But I mean, later on he became the worldly and wise David Bowie. But then he probably was making poor decisions, like we all have in our early lives.
Okay, so I don't know for sure if this is real. I've seen a few accounts of people saying this is real. I'm sorry for the Mariah Carey fans out there because it doesn't always. This is not going to paint her maybe in a great light, but it says so. Mariah Carey has two. I know that she has twins. One's named Monroe for Marilyn Monroe, and then other one's named, I think he goes by like Rock, and it's like rock and roll or something of that. I don't know. It's something to do with music, right?
Okay.
So anyway, point of the story was apparently when she gave birth, she had the hospital play a recording of her performing Fantasy so that she could hear a live crowd cheering her on while she gave birth.
I'm not surprised by that.
No, whether it's true. I mean, does anyone really know, Tim? I don't know if we ever will, but if there's someone I could see doing it, it's Mariah Carey.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've never met Mariah Carey. I'm not a super fan. I don't have any insider information or knowledge about Mariah Carey. But she is like an Elton John style diva. That's how she comes across to me. I read a story about some kind of backstage shenanigans with Mariah Carey. And apparently one of her personal assistants said that the onto the stage had to be a ramp because Mariah doesn't do stairs.
I've heard that before. I've also seen that she works out in like high-heeled tennis shoes because she doesn't wear flat shoes ever.
Okay,
and that just makes me hurt. I can't confirm or deny that, Tim. That's just what I heard. Now, this one I have heard a few times, and I think it's cool. Did you know Johnny Cash worked as a code breaker for the military?
No,
in the 1950s.
I didn't know that.
So I cannot confirm or deny this. So if it's fake, everyone, it's fake. But I've heard this a few times, and I found it on a few different websites. I always worry I'm going to give out fake information and someone's going to come for me. But supposedly he worked as a code breaker and from the military in the 50s. But I've never seen Johnny Cash say was in the military. So no confirming or denying it, but that would be cool if he was.
Maybe his ring of fire was actually a decoder ring of fire. I don't know. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe he was an undercover agent. You just don't know.
I mean, it's possible. So, Tim, have you ever heard of a band? Now, this is the early 2000s called Buckethead.
Yes, I'm very familiar with Buckethead. Let me tell you what I know about Buckethead. Okay. Buckethead is a virtuoso guitar player, absolutely virtuoso guitar player. His real name, I can tell you, is Brian Carroll.
Lots of Brians out there that are good guitar players.
Yeah, he's Brian Carroll. The only reason you know that is because at the very beginning of his career, there used to be like a hometown hero singing guitar player or Guitar World magazine, and you could send in a picture and they would put like, your picture, and then it would say your name, and it would say who your influence is and what band you play is and stuff like that. And it was supposed to be so that local players could get their picture and face and guitar player along with all the celebrities. And back sometime in the 80s, late 80s, I believe it is, there's a picture of little Brian Carroll, and he's got his hand, and he's got like finger extensions which are like plastic coming off it, and it says, I'm listening to this and listening to that, and I'm playing so and so. And that's the only time Buckethead's face has ever been seen.
Because he's always wearing a bucket on his head.
Yeah, and a like a some kind of hockey mask type thing, and it completely covers his head. He's incredibly secretive. He doesn't really give interviews, and if he does, he uses it in like a funny type voice. He played in Guns N' Roses for a period of time, in that era of Guns N' Roses, which is only Axl and nobody else. He was the lead guitarist in that, and he normally has a KFC bucket on his head. Yeah. Sometimes it says funeral on it, chicken funeral, and he wears like a mask. He played at the All Points Music Sanctuary in Roanoke 4 or 5 years ago, and I know some people that went to that concert and they said it was the worst thing ever. And like he like makes noises with his guitar and it sounds like a video game, and he does like a solo where he does nunchucks. But also if you like the wacky world of Buckethead, he's incredibly prolific. He's released hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of albums. About, yeah. Well, speak to that.
So he has recorded 13. Recorded 13 albums alone in just 2007. As if that wasn't enough, he insisted on burning each copy personally that he put in every one of the little things that went out, and hand drawing each of the art for every disc. So 12,987 CDs he burnt personally, and 12,987 drawings that he put on every disc that went out.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. He also was supposed to play in Ozzy Osbourne's band. Yeah. And, Ozzy Osbourne, my understanding, he's a pretty straight down the line kind of person. There's no airs and graces with Ozzy. You get what you get. So he was recommended to Ozzy's people. So he meets with this guy and he wouldn't take the mask off. And then he said, look, dude, you want to play in my band? I have to meet you. We're gonna hang out and stuff. And then so he took the mask off and he comes back with like a green alien head on his head. And he said, well, what's your name? And he said, I'm not going to tell you my name. Not even my mother uses my name. And he's like, okay, we're done here. Next.
That's funny. All right, guys. So the next one is about Slash. Speaking of Guns N' Roses, he says that he did not don, his hat and his hair and all this famous stuff because he wanted to create a wacky persona or anything of that nature. He actually started doing it as a way to hide his face because he had severe stage fright.
Yeah, I can believe that. And also the story is with the top hat and the belt, things were very different in the early parts of Slash's life, and he stole both those items from a boutique in Hollywood.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and I always isn't his mom like a famous like fashion something?
Yeah, she was a costume designer.
That's what it was.
And I think growing up, David Bowie was in a relationship with his mother. So as young Saul Hudson would wake up on a Sunday morning and there'd be David Bowie in the house. I mean,
Fair enough. So the next one is going into another artist, Tim, that does weird and wacky things and won't surprise you, is Bob Dylan.
Okay.
Dylan created a movie called Ronaldo and Carla about a fictional musician playing in Dylan's band. The musician is played by Dylan, which would be confusing enough, but Dylan also plays the parts of Bob Dylan himself in the same movie.
Now that is very confusing. Do you know what that reminds me of?
What's that?
Now, you're familiar with the film Smokey and the Bandit
Yes,
with Burt
many times over.
Reynolds, Jackie Gleason, Sally Field, all that kind of stuff. Now, they came out with the first one, and it was incredibly successful. And Burt Reynolds was convinced to do it by his friend Hal Needham being a stuntman who wanted to get into directing, and he did it as a favor. They didn't spend a lot of money on it. The budget got horrifically cut just before they started filming. And, you know, what came out was this legendary film from 1977.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it was very popular. And then I think the next year or the year after, they come out with Smokey and the Bandit 2. And that isn't such a good film, but it was quite popular, and everyone reprised their roles and what have you. So at this point, Burt Reynolds becomes a lot more famous than he had been previously, and he's in everything. You know, in the 80s, as for male leads, Burt Reynolds was the guy. And the studio wanted to do Smokey and the Bandit 3.
Okay.
And Burt Reynolds didn't want to do it because he had other commitments. He wanted to move on from that, you know, that kind of stuff. All the rest of the cast were you know, still famous, but didn't quite have the kind of
Burt Reynolds level.
Burt Reynolds clout, if you will. So they decided they were going to make the film anyway.
Okay.
So Smokey and the Bandit 3, what was released is the Snowman. He was the bandit, or pretending to be the bandit. And Jackie Gleason was the bandit. It's yet again another car chase type film. That's got released. It was not popular. It flopped. That was the end of that. Okay. And then roll forward 30 something years, and then the internet gets invented. And there's a rumor on the internet. The original film was called Smokey is the Bandit. And what it was is Jackie Gleason was the cop, the bandit.
Okay.
And then Jackie Gleason was also going to play the character of the bandit, wearing the bandit's clothes and a fake moustache. And then he was playing both parts.
Both characters.
And this
Very
was like
Mr. Bean or something. Yeah.
This was an urban myth for years. And there was no one could find anything to prove this. And then somebody finds a newspaper clipping from like the Georgia Sentinel or something. And there's a tiny little picture of Jackie Gleason in the Bandit stuff, talking about there's a film coming out and Jackie Gleason's going to be playing both parts. And we're like, well, you know, maybe it was a misunderstanding. There's still, so no one on the film has spoken about this.
There's
and
no official release or anything.
Official thing. And then it was about 5 or 6 years ago, somebody found the real trailer of Smokey is the Bandit, and put it up on YouTube. And it's exactly that. And there's clips from the film, and there's Buford T. Justice talking about how he's going to play both parts. Unbelievable. So and what happened is apparently they made the film, they cut the film, they gave it to some test audiences, and the test audiences were so confused by this, and the film made no sense. And it was so confusing, they had to go back and then recut a load of scenes.
See, I would be somebody who's really bad at watching. I'm terrible at watching TV shows, movies. Me and Tim have talked I'm good at watching like a YouTube video or listening to a podcast, but my brain doesn't work very well when I'm watching things just visually. I'm very much an audio person. And so I would be lost. I can tell you right now, I'd just be like, why is that guy back again? Like, I wouldn't get it.
Yeah, it was apparently so incredibly confusing. It was just hard to deal with.
Maybe I'm just insulting myself, but I don't think I would be intelligent enough to get it. Anyway, so this is something very interesting. The artist is Rick James. Did you know Rick James was once in a Canadian garage band whose lineup included Neil Young? What was he doing in Canada? Dodging the Vietnam draft.
No.
Which allegedly put him to prison for a year. I can't imagine a world where Neil Young and Rick James are playing in the same band.
I can't imagine that world, but I'd like to be part of that world. That'd be an incredibly interesting world.
To be a fly on the wall in Canada, of all places, and Neil Young and Rick James are playing it. And then you got to wonder, where are the rest of the band members and who are they?
I don't know. I sort of like that. I like that dynamic. I mean, yeah, Neil Young. We spoke about him before. He's kind of a cool guy. He's up for some different ideas and stuff. Rick James comes along. I mean, it's fine, you know.
Yeah, I mean, but still, Tim, that's just the weird thing. But I do find it funny that, of course, Neil Young was dodging the Vietnam draft, and that's why he was in Canada.
Well, of course.
They didn't even specifically say it was Neil Young, but I Googled it just to be sure. But I'm like, it's got to be Neil Young. All right. So Bonnie Tyler is known for having kind of a very distinct voice, right, Tim?
Yes.
So basically, do you know how she got it? Surgery gone wrong. She had a necessary operation on her vocal cords. Then, against doctor's orders, she screamed and did different singing things through her recovery period. And so her vocal cords are actually damaged for the rest of her life. And that's how she got that sound.
I didn't know that. I mean, she had such a distinctive sort of raspy type voice, which couldn't be anyone except Bonnie Tyler. But just, if you have any kind of procedure, you should always listen to what the recovery is supposed to be. But maybe in this instance, the fact that she didn't listen was a good thing.
But I always wonder, because when your vocal cords start to rub together and you get raspiness or you get grittiness, I feel like it'd be painful. I wonder if it would hurt.
Yeah,
and would singing hurt for the rest of your life?
I don't know. I mean, I've known a few singers who've had nodules on their vocal cords, and in fact, one singer in particular I knew had to have surgery to have them removed, and it was touch and go whether he would ever be able to sing in a band ever again.
It's literally like every singer's worst nightmare, Tim, is to get vocal nodules. And it's funny that you bring that up because when you're young and they're teaching you to use your diaphragm, don't pull from your chest too much. Try to use your head voice. The reason they're trying to get you to learn that is because if you're pulling from your chest, your vocal, cords could start rubbing together and it can lead to vocal nodules. Well, in the movie Pitch Perfect, which I know you have not seen, but I love all the Pitch Perfect movies because they're about like a choir that does a cappella, you know what I mean? They travel. In one of them, they lose the competition. And so they're like... She was like, what? And then something happens and they put them back in the competition. And she was like, what happened with your high notes? You didn't sound very Christina Aguilera today. And she was like, I had surgery for vocal nodules. I didn't think we were going to be part of the competition again. And that's like the whole joke. But because she had the vocal nodules, it's not true, but because she had the vocal nodule surgery, she was able to hit the lower notes and the lower registers, and they were an a cappella group of all girls, so it became useful. It's just like a joke they played in it. But yeah, they were like, you have vocal nodules. Everybody starts crying around them because it's every singer's worst nightmare.
I like the fact they Hollywoodized that because the person I know that had vocal nodules, they had the surgery and they couldn't even talk for 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah. I know. If you watch the movie, the whole thing's ridiculous, Tim. But anyway, I love it, but it's ridiculous. I've heard a little bit about this, and me and Tim have talked about Madonna is not necessarily done some things we agree with.
No.
Apparently, in the summer of 2006, she mandated venues in places like Phoenix and LA. And for those who don't know this, we're talking 90 to like 110-degree weather to turn off the air conditioner at her concerts because they were indoor concerts because she wanted to protect her voice.
Yeah, I've heard that. And I've also heard that from, I think David Lee Roth on the last Van Halen tour had exactly the same requirement because he felt that it would affect his voice adversely. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some truth to that. And I'd imagine going from, one climate to another climate in the arena, but I mean, how much difference does that make really in a huge arena like that?
I don't know, but I mean, it just seems incredibly selfish if you know it's 90 to 100 degrees outside, Tim, to just say, well, we'll take the chance and turn off all the AC. I don't know. That seems incredibly selfish to me.
I mean, it is. I mean, but at the same time, you want the singer to give their best performance because that's who you're paying to see. But I mean, yeah, even Phoenix in the summer and you're playing the Enormo Dome and you've turned the AC off. I mean, I don't know about that. But then again, every concert I've ever been to in the UK didn't have air conditioning.
That's because they have some weird thing against air conditioning.
Yeah, what is it with the UK and no air conditioning?
I don't know, but I was just on TikTok and someone was complaining about she's an American who's living in Germany. And she was complaining about this thing. First of all, she was complaining about the deodorant in the UK. It's not as good as what she swears you get in the United States, but that's a debate for another time. But then
Hmm.
she was like, and it's just warm enough now that every place I ever go in, all it's going to smell like is sweaty people and no air conditioning and no ice in my drink.
Yeah, I can live without the ice and the drinks, but I mean, I'm team air conditioning. I've been team air conditioning long before I lived here.
I don't know what it is, but yeah, I learned very quickly what both times I went to Europe for some reason. And I remember Charlie sent me when we were in Greece to a little store to pick up. He had Googled this and found this store in Athens. He wanted me to find him a Funko Pop in specifically, which I did. But that was the only store on the block that had AC, so we hung out in there just a little bit longer than anywhere else. The other thing I don't understand about different countries and hotels I've stayed in. What is with the showers where like the whole floor of the bathroom is the shower, Tim, and there's just like a drain in the middle of the bathroom. You have to flood the whole bathroom to take a shower.
Yeah, I think it's called a wet bathroom, I believe is what they call it.
Well, it's definitely wet, but it makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I mean the brickwork is probably tilted, so it all goes down
Yeah.
down the hole. But I mean, certainly from a hotel perspective, I'm sure it's probably easier to clean the bathroom because if you have like an
That's true.
old style tub with a shower in it, that's a lot of cleaning, a lot of crevices. And even if you have like a shower with a hard booth, if you like, that you get in, again, there's lots of crevices around that could get mold and things like that. If you have a wet shower room, you'd replace the curtain, you mop the floor, and you're in business.
That is true. That's valid, but I couldn't imagine having that in your house because the floor gets wet every time someone uses it. Like, you know what I mean, Tim? It wouldn't be very practical inside a house to be.
No, but I mean, I've seen big posh people houses that have that sort of stuff going on.
Of course, there are also bathrooms in bars in England that use carpet in the bathroom, so I'll take it
Oh,
as
I mean,
whatever.
I grew up with that. I grew up knowing people who had
Uh,
carpets in the bathroom and have those
uh,
little carpety bits around the bottom of the toilet and a
no,
carpet bit on the top of the cistern
no
and a piece
additional
of carpet on the toilet seat. Have you ever
No,
seen that?
I have. Back in the day, my grandma had one of those stupid things. Sorry, grandma, but
And
it's true.
you would have your toilet rolls on a shelf and they would have like a knitted toilet roll warmer on it.
Oh my God. I will stand on this. This is the hill I will die on, especially in bars, because those are the grossest bathrooms ever. Carpet has no place being in a bathroom, period.
No, I can't wait to rip the carpet out of this house. We have carpet upstairs, we have hard floors downstairs. I can't wait to rip this carpet out. To be honest, I can't afford to rip it out right now because I've got other things I
Fair.
need to do. But as soon as that's a budgetary thing that we can do,
The
we're going
carpets are
to rip the
gone.
lot out and get someone to put wooden floors in up here.
Because the thing about it is it's just harder to clean. Stuff gets stained, stuff gets stuck in there. I mean, I don't know. I'm not like anti-carpet, but I'm definitely anti-carpet in the bathroom. All right. So moving along, back to this isn't a show about PSA about carpets and bathrooms, but the next one is about Bon Scott from AC/DC. Did you know he was originally in a band called the Valentines, Tim?
Yes, and I've seen black and white footage
I
of
was going to
him.
say, it's on YouTube.
Yeah, he was on Australian TV, and it was almost like a doo-wop thing where they're all dressed the same and they're all
Very
doing dance
bubblegum
moves.
pop.
Yeah.
So if you go on the YouTubes and you type in Valentine's Aussie Bubblegum Pop Bon Scott, you will find a version of them singing Build Me a Buttercup of all songs. They're wearing they've got they look like they're going to take your daughter out to milkshakes after church kind of outfits, literally wearing a cardigan sweater. Of all the people you could imagine wearing a cardigan sweater, Bon Scott is not one of those that comes to mind.
Yeah, it's a bit of a departure to be in AC/DC, but in the realm of music, we all have to start somewhere, and we might take a stylistic shift. I mean, when I left England, the main band I was playing in was Rough Justice. Rough Justice was a classic rock cover band. That's probably my favorite kind of music to play. Is that sort of hard rock, classic rock, that kind of stuff.
Of course.
And then the first musical act that I got involved with was a band called the Bobby Deal Band, which was an older gentleman who had just left his work. I think he was almost 70 years old, and he created this kind of social club and he wanted to be the house band. Anyway, I was in this band for about 5 minutes. and it was incredibly middle of the road social club type music. And it was such a stylistic shift. It was so entertaining.
I would love to see that. So it is, that is cool. It just random. I had never heard of it. And if you have the time, I'm making the recommendation. We'll put it up on the Facebook page, make a note, Tim, to go look at the Valentines with Bon Scott. Now, another band that you might not have known kind of started out they're definitely not AC/DC, but the Bee Gees, and they were Barry Gibb and the Bee Gees back in the day, actually started out in the 50s doing kind of the same things. They were playing like Happy Days style pop ballads. Have you ever seen any of those from them, Tim?
No, I haven't. I mean, I'm aware of the sort of pre-disco era Bee Gees, but I wasn't really aware that they were doing that sort of stuff at the very beginning of their career.
Well, we talk about how incredibly talented they are. They literally look like small children. They're young. The two younger brothers, and then because it's Barry singing lead, but they look so young, Tim. Like they have been playing music since like 19. I mean, we know how talented they are and how many songs they've written and all the things, but basically, I didn't imagine them as child stars, what they pretty much were.
Well, there we are. Well, I started playing in bands when I was 13 or thereabouts. So, we all start early, Joy.
Fair enough. All right. So I did fall down a little bit of a rabbit hole because I'm generally curious, because I was curious to find out about the band with Rick James and Neil Young. And it is true. And actually, he was hiding from the U.S. Navy, apparently. So that is true. I went down a rabbit hole to make sure. But Rick James' first job in the music business came in 1964, singing for a Canadian garage band called the Minor Birds when he was 15 years old. Back then, he was known as Ricky James Matthew, and he looked like he was a ninth grader basically in this photo. The lineup included Neil Young, but yeah. They had a full band. They even had a Beatles-esque harmony kind of debut single called It's My Time.
Interesting.
And you can find it on YouTube, everybody.
Yeah, well, there we are. Well, ladies and gentlemen, stop what you're doing and pull up the YouTubes and have a listen to that.
Well, here's the even crazier part. So while we were talking, I was like, I want to know more about this band. The band was actually on the fast track to success with a contract from Motown. Who knew?
Wow.
And a debate album on the horizon, which got Rick James into serious trouble, an activity he would later make into a secondary career. Let's just say he did some bad things. But yeah, apparently they were both, him and his bandmates had all signed with Motown. The thing was, everything he told both Motown and his bandmates about himself was a lie. His name wasn't Ricky James Matthews. It wasn't even Rick James. His name's with James Johnson. And he was also hiding from the U.S. Army from Vietnam. So it wasn't just Neil. There you go, guys. They were both in Canada to try to get out of the Vietnam War.
They should have hidden in Floyd.
I mean, Floyd is kind of the Canada of Virginia.
Yeah, so we live close to a place called Floyd, and Floyd is a very interesting world, I suppose. It's like a confluence of a lot of things all in one place in a rural community. You have like lots of LGBTQ folks living there. You have people. Yeah, you have people with Trump hats living there. You have farmers. You have people from all walks of life.
In the yoga kind of stuff.
You have people from all around the world all seem to have settled in Floyd. And all those folks live together, and they live together in more or less harmony, and everyone just accepts everyone and gets on with it.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's a very odd dynamic going on in Floyd. But one thing about Floyd is that to get there, there's a road called Route 8 that will take you there and that takes you to the interstate. And then, of course, the interstate will take you to anywhere else in the country. But back during the Vietnam War era, Route 8 had not been built yet. Or if it had been built, it was a very basic road, not the sort of 2-lane blacktop that it is now. So a lot of people wanting to dodge the draft used to go down to Floyd because it was a bit of a nightmare to get there. And they figured no one would trek down to Floyd to find them.
Valid. All right. Well, now we know that both Neil Young and Rick James were trying to avoid the draft, and he found his name, Rick James, because that was the fake name he was using, so the draft didn't find him.
Well, there
The
we
more
are.
you know, Tim. But I still can't imagine Neil Young and Rick James playing in the same band, signed to Motown from Canada.
There's all kinds of strange things can happen, I suppose.
All right, so this is gonna be a tongue twister, Tim. Just hear me out. So Fiona Apple, you're familiar with Fiona Apple, right?
Absolutely.
In 1999, she released an album entitled "When the Pawn Hits the Conflicts, He Thinks Like a King. When he throws the blows, when he goes to the fight, he'll win the whole thing. For he enters the ring, there's no body to batter. When your mind is your might. So when you go solo, you hold your own hand and remember the depth that is the greatest of heights. And if you know where you stand, then you know where you land. And if you fall, it won't matter because you'll know that you are right."
Now, the name of the album is not supposed to be the verse and the chorus of your song.
That was the entitled name. Like, what else did they put on the front cover?
How did the record company abbreviate that on the cover? That's what I want to know.
There's no body to batter.
Oh, okay.
Apparently, that's like the little abbreviation I kept seeing. But still, like the whole album, that in and of itself seems so pretentious to me.
Yeah, I mean, what are you trying to gain with that nonsense?
Attention, I guess it worked. We're still talking about it. We don't talk about Fiona Apple that much.
No, whatever became of Fiona Apple? She
I
was
don't know.
she was a 90s thing and then kind of just fizzled into nothing.
I mean, I like some of her music from the 90s, but I think she's still on like whatever they call the Twitter thing now. I remember seeing her on there for a while.
The question I would ask is, does Fiona Apple use Apple products?
That's a great question. She might not, just in spite of it. Her real name can't be Fiona Apple, right? That's a stage name. Let's look.
Have a look. Give it a goog, Joy.
Fiona Apple McAfee Mogart. What was she born, though? That's what we want to know. Oh, I guess she was everything but what I was trying to say. She was born Fiona Apple McAfee Maggart.
Okay.
So there you go, guys. Apple is her legal middle name.
There we are. Isn't the guy from Coldplay, doesn't he have a daughter called Apple?
Is that him? Oh, yeah, he was married to what's-her-face, right?
Gwyneth Paltrow.
I was thinking that's Gwyneth Paltrow's daughter, but I think you're right. They were married to each other.
Yeah, and I think the child is called Apple.
I mean, it's not that crazy of a name, but Fiona Apple just sounds like a very good stage name to me, so...
It does. Well, I used to know a guy who I played music with in and around the music scene in London. And, he was someone you see at open mic nights. I never played in a band with him or anything. And his name was Joe Hollywood. And that was his real name. He was the son of the Hollywoods. He
was destined to live the life he lived, I guess.
Exactly. I don't know what ever became of Joe Hollywood, but it was someone you used to see around.
When I worked at Dish Network, I did an internship in the resource department, and that's how I ended up in human resources. Though the resource department at a call center I was under the human resources category, but I was actually watching like the queues and stuff, Tim, making sure people weren't in the bathroom for too long and just that kind of IT side of it.
Yeah.
And there was a guy there, and this is a country singer, if you don't know. This country singer's name is John Michael Montgomery. That's his full name. You ever seen who wears the black hat? There was a guy there, and that was his full name and everything he had. I don't know why. He was one of the only people who put like his full name on everything, like all of his profiles, It would just show up John Michael Montgomery. Him break for too long. John Michael Montgomery left for the day. And every time I would see it, I would laugh a little.
I think I know who John Michael Montgomery is. Didn't he do a song called Wildfire?
Oh, I've never heard of it. But I'm not saying he didn't.
Is that John Michael?
The song I think of is "Sold" by John Michael Montgomery, because that's like the one that everybody like laughs about, because you have to, if you grew up in the South, you can sing it. It's really fast. It's the Grundy County Auction.
No, I was wrong. It was Michael Martin Murphy. It was someone else with three very clear names. I was confused.
Anyway, yeah, they're the sold at the Grundy County Auction. Hey, pretty lady, won't you give me a sign? I'd do anything to make you my own mind. That song. Have you ever heard that, Tim? I'll be your bidding, breaking call.
I probably have. I did a lot of gigs driving in a pickup truck going there with the 94.9 Star Country, so I'm sure I've probably heard that.
Well, it's kind of known, like, and there was actually, I think, like a trend that was going on the internet. And, like, if you grew up in the South, you know every word to the Grundy County auction song, and you could sing it because it's supposed to be like an auctioneer. This is at an auction. Yeah.
There we
Anyway,
go.
guys, Joy has that party trick in her, in her, I guess, her cap if you ever wanted to. Anyway, so back to this one. I think, Tim, you may have talked about this a little bit before. So if you have, I'm sorry, but I couldn't remember. The Who appeared on Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour.
Yes, we did a whole thing on this a few episodes ago.
Okay,
where
then
there
I'll
was
leave it alone.
Yeah, where they put dynamite in the bass drum and somebody fainted, and then Pete Townsend
That's what I was like, something
blew
sounds
out his
familiar with that
eardrum.
one.
Yeah, we've done that one a few episodes ago.
Fair enough. All right. So this is interesting to me because I had never. So Jack White of the band, what is that band, Tim?
The White Stripes.
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know anything besides the one song everybody knows from the White Stripes. No clue.
Seven Nation Army is the song that you're thinking of.
Yeah, that's the only song I know. And to be fair, that's not even like in the top of my repertoire or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I guess in 2012, Jack White recorded a song called Freedom at 21. He released it by tying 1,000 discs to 1,000 helium balloons and letting them float away. I have a problem with this. That just seems like a good way to hurt wildlife in the sky and make a lot of pollution. Am I being negative?
Yeah, because not everybody is going to be into that. Not everybody has a record player. And like you say, depending on where you release them, I mean, they're vinyl records and balloon matter that are getting distributed everywhere. So, I mean, from a kind of being cool to the world type thing, it's not great, though it is a very novel and unique way of distributing your music. I mean, one thing I will say is Jack White has his own record pressing plant, and he has a record label called Third Man Records. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he was doing something on a vinyl record and doing something wacky with it, that doesn't surprise me at all. Unless he released them in some kind of field somewhere and there was people waiting to catch them or something. I don't know.
Fair enough. All right. So, Tim, you talked about this band a little bit during the last episode is Kings of Leon. You talked about their song Sex on Fire.
Yep.
Well, during a concert in 2010, yes, Tim, you have a year now. 2010, a concert, a swarm of pigeons may have came and attacked the band. It went to the bathroom on them. Okay. They attempted to keep playing. They only gave up and ran off stage after a bird landed one of its poops directly in the lead singer's mouth.
Ooh.
As a musician who's played many venues, Tim, how does this make you feel?
It's disgusting. I don't think I've had wildlife matter, if you will, deposited on me whilst playing music. I don't think. As I said, I've had carpenter bees above my head chewing away at woodworking in a canopy over the stage and then sawdust falling on me. I've had that. I've probably seen wasps and bees and other such flying objects flying around the stage, but no, I have not come across that before.
I don't know if that happened to me, I could go on. Yeah. I know they say, Tim, the show must go on, but I don't know. That might be where I draw the line.
Well, I mean, that's disgusting. But I mean, as you know, Dave Grohl fell off stage in Denmark somewhere. He broke his leg. The band played cover songs for 25 minutes, and he came back sitting on a plastic chair with a a doctor bandaging the leg, saying you need to get to the ER. And he says, "No, I've got 45 minutes. I need to finish this set." And he sat there with a guitar, was sitting on a plastic chair, finishing the gig.
And see, I could see. So I am the kind of person who says stuff like that. But I am also the kind of person who injures himself a lot. So I'm very familiar with how I handle those situations. And I probably would do the same thing. And then after it was done, I would complain like no other. Because like, what was it? 3-4 years ago, Tim knows this, I broke my foot. And I was actually in a boot for quite a bit of time. And Charlie comes home and here I am vacuuming the house, cooking. And he's like, you have a broken foot, but like you can't stop living just because you have a broken foot.
No, absolutely. You just need to carry on and do what you do.
My doctor didn't recommend that and kept complaining to me that was why the swelling wouldn't go down. But, you know, tomato, or however Tim says it. He probably says tomato.
It's tomato.
It's tomato.
Well, you know what's funny? Big discussion in the break room this week.
What's that?
Pronunciations. So one,
Pronunciations.
yeah, pronunciations. One,
Okay.
garage, not garage. So that's one.
Garage.
Two, the brand of car which I drive is a Nissan.
Nissan.
And another kind of car, a Korean-made car, is a Hyundai.
Hyundai.
You would say Hyundai.
Yeah, I wouldn't say what you said.
It's Hyundai.
I can't say. Yeah. So
And
this was an ongoing topic at work, I'm guessing then.
and also the perennial favorite, aluminium.
What?
Aluminium. Aluminium.
Are you saying aluminum?
Well, yes, but I'm saying aluminium, which is how it's said.
I've heard so many of the words that like I'm usually immune to like when Tim says like yogurt now, and I know all your terms, but I've never heard you say aluminum before.
Yeah, aluminium foil. You put it around your turkey at Christmas. Put it in the oven.
What's so funny about that is one of the when I was a kid, one of the vocal warm-ups my vocal coach and my choir director always has to do is red leather, yellow, aluminum, aluminum. And so like that would work because you don't say aluminum the way we do.
No, we say aluminium.
Red leather, yellow. I've never heard you say that one. It took me off guard. I didn't even actually know what you were saying for a second. All right, Tim, how much time do I have left?
I tell you, do one more for us.
All right, I'm going to do two, but they're pretty quick. They're
Okay.
very quick. So I like how I asked him, and then I'm like, I'm going against you. Chuck Berry. So, he has like the little duck walk thing he does whenever he's like playing. He says that he realized that actually came because one day his pants were all crumpled up. He didn't get the wrinkles out. And so he bent over to block the wrinkles while he was playing the guitar. And that's how his duck walk came to be.
I could see that. I mean, he struck me as a complicated person, but probably a proper gentleman in the terms of performing. Though his offstage persona he wasn't a good person.
Exactly. Now, this one I just thought was random. Have you ever heard the State Farm jingle, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there?
Yep.
You've heard that, right? I don't know if that's a universal thing, but in America, we have a insurance company, and they have a little jingle, and that's what they say. Barry Manilow actually wrote the State Farm jingle in 1971. Did you know that?
I did know that. Now,
how did you know that?
So there are a number of Barry Manilow live albums. I like me a bit of Manilow. Manilow isn't necessarily an everyday listen for me, but for someone to have that kind of longevity, they have to be good. And Manilow is, a performer, songwriter, etc., etc. But before he was the Barry Manilow that we will know and love now, he used to write jingles. That was his sort of first thing that he did in the music career. And I have a number of Barry Manilow albums, and he does a medley called A Very Strange Medley. And he does a medley of all those songs that he wrote, State Farm being one. I think there's a Coca-Cola one that he wrote, and there's a few others as well. And he strings them all together. So yes, I did know that he wrote the State Farm jingle.
Well, there you go, guys. If you didn't know that, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They are not sponsoring this podcast for clarification purposes, but Barry Manilow wrote that. All right, Tim, are we going to leave the people with your famous last words?
Well, I just have one thing for you. So I should have addressed this at the very beginning of the show, but just a little thing. This week, our friend Taylor Swift, who I still have not heard any of her music.
I thought about bringing that up too.
Yeah, Taylor Swift, we know she's released a new album. I mean, that's outside of the scope of things that I can talk about intelligently because I don't know. I know one's been released, but that's all I know.
Yes.
But this week, she joined Threads.
Whoa. Things are getting crazy and heated on there, man.
Yeah, and I looked just out of interest how many followers she had on Threads. And when I checked, it was 9 million people. Now, Lord. I'm going to pull up the Threads now, because as everybody knows, I'm super into this Threads. It's like everything that Twitter used to be, and I think it's a little bit better.
Ironically, Molly Lawson, who is on this podcast, who Tim has said, expresses her love of Taylor very often, has recently joined Threads. And I can't wonder if that's not coincidental. But anyway.
Well, it was yesterday I checked, and she now has 9.5 million followers.
Good Lord. Well, I mean, There are a lot of T Swift fans out there, kind of like my what was my thing last year? What's her face from last week? What's her face from Hole complaining about Taylor Swift being irrelevant?
Well, like I said, I haven't heard any of her music, and I'm sure if I heard it, it's not necessarily my cup of tea. However, you can't doubt the cultural influence and celebrity that Taylor Swift has, and her music
That's exactly how I feel about it.
Yeah, music's so important to an awful lot of people. It's not for me. It's not for the kind of music I want to listen to. But you cannot deny that.
Yep. That is very true. I agree with you, Tim. And that is a good thing to leave the people with. And if you like Taylor and you're on Threads, go like her page.
Exactly. And if you're on what's left of Twitter, sign up for Threads. It's much better.
That's our PSA for the day. Do they call PSAs in the UK? Or is that a strictly American thing? Public service announcement.
I'm sure they have something that's similar, but growing up, I'd never heard of a PSA until they said it in this country.
Okay. I mean, I was curious, like, if there was like a public broadcast for something that they would say, but all right.
Not really.
In the 90s, there was a lot of PSAs on TV going, do you know where your children are? And, indicating they're out doing drugs and stuff.
No, we just used to have scary public information films about how we was all going to get swallowed up in a sand pit or something, or you throw your frisbee and it was going to land in like an electricity pylon.
You know what I find funny is when you talk to people from different parts of the country of America and all around the world. America's huge, guys. It's basically, Tim can tell you, swallows up half of the rest of the world. So when I say all around the world, it's very distinct people all over. And I talk to people from different countries. And somehow the same horror stories you guys were taught were the same ones we were taught. Like if you stick your hand out the window, it's going to get cut off. But then you never actually hear of anyone's hand getting cut off. But we were all told that story to get us to put our hands inside.
Exactly. Well, people are people wherever you go. And
people
one thing that's
are people, so I can't. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. One thing that strikes me, so I play music in bands in the UK, and as well as outside of playing the music, the drama, the nonsense, the things that happen, all that kind of stuff. So you move to a completely different country, completely different culture, different everything, and then you get 5 people together, and it's the same stuff. And I'm sure if I was playing in a cover band in Iran, or playing in a cover band in South Africa, or playing in a cover band in Russia, or wherever in the world, whatever the culture is, it's the same thing. People are people wherever you go.
There you go, Tim. That's our other PSA. All right. Well, let's end it right here. What's your famous last words, Tim?
Just be kind to everybody that you meet.
I agree. Bye.
Bye-bye.